At this time, John Nordstrom, a Vietnam War veteran, retired Pelican Rapids school teacher, and Boy Scout master, will now share with us a message from the perspective of a draftee sent off to war.
Nothing like having a former fifth grade student, Dan, tap you on the back before you come up to speak. I'm humbled to be speaking to you today. Every person who joins the military, whether they enlist or they're drafted during wartime or peacetime, for 2 years or 20 years, has a story to tell that is unique to them. Just think how many stories there are in the United States of America. Today, I'm going to share the story of a young man drafted, trained, and sent to Vietnam. Why my story? Well, it's the only one I have to tell, and because I made the mistake of saying the wrong thing at the right time, or was it the right thing at the wrong time, to Mike Nettiston. So here I am. Some background about me to help you understand my story. Is this thing shaking or what? I've never been a brave person, nor did I have a lot of confidence. Junior year in November, when I turned 16, I was 5 foot 1 inch tall and I weighed 90 pounds. Basically, a shy boy who did what he was told and did not get into trouble. You could add immature to that list. Entering the 10th grade, I made the decision to take typing. To practice the class, the typing teacher always assigned us to type this phrase: "Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country." I'm sure some of you are familiar with that phrase also, but we typed it a lot. During my college years at Concordia College, the Vietnam War was not something I even gave any attention to. I was studying and having a good time. After graduation, I got a job teaching elementary school in the Grand Forks Air Force Base. Getting drafted was something I never thought would happen to me. In the fall of my second year, when I received my draft notice, it really was a surprise. I was to report in December, but my principal and I met with the Swift County Draft Board. I did get deferred, but only until after the school year. And that deferment also allowed Bonnie and I to continue our wedding plans for December. So in July of 1969, I packed my little brown suitcase, said goodbye to Bonnie, and at 6 a.m. headed on the bus full of other young boys from Benson to Minneapolis to be processed. I wasn't sure what would happen that day, but after processing, my little brown suitcase and I were headed on my first plane ride to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Arriving at Fort Bragg, coming off the bus into that heat and humidity, we were greeted by drill sergeants yelling at us because we didn't move quick enough. By evening, my free green duffel bag was filled with green underwear, green T-shirts, green socks, green hankies, green shirts with my name, green pants, and black boots. This was one young man in shock and disbelief. Basic training. I said, take a deep breath. My mom kept a daily journal, and I'm quoting her. Bonnie finally got a letter from John. It was written the second day of camp. He hates it with every passing minute. End of quote. Basic was filled with many new experiences. I remember standing out on the practice field, bayonet attached to my rifle. The drill sergeant would yell, "What is the motto of the bayonet fighter?" And we'd all lunge forward, stabbing our bayonets, and yell, "To kill, to kill, to kill." This was not so me. It was so not me. I just couldn't believe it. My experience shooting a rifle, a .22 at Boy Scout camp, and not well. I couldn't close my left eye and keep my right eye open, so I had trouble aiming. I told the drill sergeant this, hoping maybe they'd send me home. He told me to make an eye patch. So a little cardboard, some tape, and a string allowed me to aim and shoot. Not very well, but I still could shoot. Qualification day with the rifle. Some guys told me to bring money to pay the scorekeeper. Well, I wasn't going to pay anyone, thinking if I wasn't a good shot when they evaluated me after basic, maybe something other than infantry. So I got down in my foxhole. I put on my eye patch and got ready. The target was the outline of the head and shoulders of a person. One would pop up in different places at different depths out there. The scorer yelled at me. He says, "The target's up." I looked out into the field. I said, "I don't see it." He said, "It's off to the right." I said, "I still don't see it." He said, "Time's running out. Shoot." So I shot. He said, "You got it." I could only hope this guy would follow me to Vietnam. I did pay attention in basic, though. As I was one of the few, well, I knew it was important. If I went there, I needed to know. So I was one of the few who got 100% on the final test. But I didn't feel like a soldier. Basic was over, and my orders came through, and they assigned this poor shooting elementary school teacher with little self-confidence to infantry school. So I loaded up my duffel bag, my little brown suitcase, and my eye patch, and headed to Fort McClellan, Alabama, to become a trained killer and probably off to Vietnam. Yes, that reality was coming quickly. One event that stands out from infantry training was one time we were returning to base camp and the enemy attacked. I didn't want to get captured because there were stories about what happened to those trainees who got captured. So I just raised my M16 and I fired off an entire clip, only to realize that if I had been Nam and had real bullets, I'd just killed 10 members of my squad standing in front of me. Maybe I needed a refresher course, but the Army said I was ready for war. Upon graduation, I was rewarded with a brand new, long green winter coat, fully lined, and orders for Vietnam. 2 weeks in Detroit Lakes with Bonnie, where we celebrated 1 year of marriage, and then it was off to Long Binh, Vietnam. The plane ride was quiet. Time to reflect and think. To be quite honest, I spent the time thinking about the fact that I was going to have to kill another person. Probably a young man just like me who was fighting because his country said he should. I wrestled with that thought a lot, thinking I'm not sure I could kill another person. It truly scared me. My other thought was very clear. I would die in Vietnam. I'm not that guy who would survive in the jungles of Vietnam, walking through rice paddies, going out on night patrols, avoiding booby traps, and being a target. So I sat with my silent thoughts on that plane and wrote a long letter to my wife and mother. Saying goodbye, telling them how much I love them. The letter was sent to my brother-in-law, who'd give it to them at the time of my death. Not great thoughts, but truly honest ones for me. At the replacement depot in Long Binh, excuse me, at the replacement depot at Long Binh, we'd receive orders to our assigned division. One day I dozed, and when I awoke, I ran out to formation and discovered they'd called my name. I went up and told the sergeant I overslept. He said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Just come tomorrow. Be okay. You're fine. Don't worry." because I was scared. And the only familiarity I had was knowing a couple of guys who had been called. I insisted I go. I argued with that sergeant. I kept begging him to let me get my file. Finally, to get rid of me, he said, if I could go find my file in all those boxes sitting over there, I could go. Frantically, I ran over there and I dug and I found my file, and then I got in line, and shortly after that, I was on a plane to the 4th Division headquarters in Pleiku, Vietnam. When we arrived, we were taken to the replacement barracks where we stayed overnight. My time to the jungle was drawing closer. Thoughts that night were reminding me that just 7 short months ago I was teaching 6th graders, and this had been one quick ride turning me into a trained killer. And to make matters worse, I left my eye patch at home. Can you just see me yelling to the enemy to wait? I gotta get my eye patch on. The next morning, I was laying on my top bunks amidst a room filled with about 75 soldiers. As I stared off into the unknown, my thoughts were filled with fear. And where would I be at the end of this day? I lay there thinking, and all of a sudden, a sergeant walked through the room, interrupting my thoughts. And he asked, does anyone know how to type? Volunteering in the Army, I remember from basic when they asked if anyone knew how to drive a dump truck. Those boys spent the afternoon pushing a wheelbarrow. But I didn't care. Without the slightest hesitation from me, I shot my arm up in the air and I yelled, I do. One day of typing would be one less day in the jungle and one more day alive. There were 4 of us who left with the sergeant to a room filled with typewriters. He explained that they needed some clerks, and we would be given a typing test to see if we qualified. He said, I'll give you some time to warm up. I sat at that big Remington typewriter. I'll bet you know what I typed. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. Over and over and over and over I typed that till he said, time's up, here's your test. I passed. I became the secretary for Chief Warrant Officer M.E. Cheeks. Every morning I made his coffee and spent the day typing his correspondence. Now I had a great letter to send home. Because I spent my 14 months in Vietnam behind a Remington typewriter, I always tell people when I was in Vietnam, I was a Remington Raider. It brings a smile to my face, although a questioning look from others. I also always think about how I was so fortunate. I mean, they didn't walk through the barracks asking for typists every day. And think about how I argued with that sergeant to get on that flight instead of waiting the next day, and who knows where I would have gone. My mind always says, why me? Why was I in the right place at the right time? I'm a man of faith, but so are many other young men. Always think back to that young boy of 15 entering 10th grade who made that life-changing decision to select typing as one of his classes. Who would ever have thought that now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country would play such a big part in my life? When I got out of the Army and became a veteran, my Army service did not make me very proud or happy. My time in Vietnam, my observation, caused me to form opinions, which I never had formed before about the Vietnam War. I believed that there was little reason to be there fighting. Vietnamese people had their farms and villages destroyed. Many of them lost family members to the war. They weren't better off. So many soldiers on both sides died. I was upset. I was angry that I had had to go to Vietnam, that anyone had to go. Since my time in service, I often think back to what I should have done when I was drafted. I read a book called Friendly Fire, a true story. Michael Mullins, 25 years old, same age as I was given orders for Vietnam. He called home crying because he was upset that he didn't figure a way out of going as others had done. That's the way I felt. I had friends who figured a way out. I often said to myself when I was home, I said I should have gone to Canada, but I knew I never would have. First, I wasn't brave enough, and second, I wouldn't even know how to have done it. I struggled with those thoughts. I often thought about other young men. I'm a history major too, and I remember recalling that when they bombed Pearl Harbor, many young men ran off to enlist in the military. I just could not believe that I would ever have done that. And another thought that always enters my head were those men landing on the beaches of Normandy. How or what would I have done? I just can't picture me charging out of that landing craft. But here I was, a veteran, not just a willing one who only served 19 months, not one who survived fighting in the jungle. I remember going to Branson to a show, and of course they always played a patriotic song and asked the veterans to stand. Bonnie looked at me, but I didn't stand up. I never stood up. I was just a clerk. I was lucky. I didn't fight. I didn't want to be in the Army. I was not a real veteran. I have the highest respect for all veterans who serve their country. For those who suffer physically and mentally for years after their service, my heart aches. And the greatest respect for those men and women who gave their life and their families who miss them every day. As a Boy Scout leader, I've been to many Memorial Day programs. The difference, I had to be there. Somebody had to make sure the boys showed up to usher and march in the parade. One year, jokingly, I said to my son-in-law, who's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Guard, "Hey, tomorrow's our day. It's Memorial Day. We can do whatever we want." He said to me, "It's not your day. You're here." Wow. Talk about being slapped in the face. I knew that. I just never put it in the correct perspective. Then I started playing with the band of Faith on Memorial Day. The music, the pictures, it just spoke to me. Those men and women who sacrificed their lives so that we can live the life we have, well, they are special. And no matter what you think of war or that police action or whatever it is, they need to be remembered. I'm still here. I didn't want to be in the Army. I didn't want to go to Vietnam. And I'm alive because I did get lucky. But I'm still a veteran. A veteran who did what was asked of him, who ended up typing his way through Vietnam. But today and every day, I will stand up to say I'm a veteran, standing to remember those veterans whose letters to their loved ones were delivered, who can't stand up. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for sharing your story. We all thank you for your military service during the Vietnam War, for following through with your commitment to serve our country as a draftee, and for your lasting legacy as a Pelican Rapids teacher, Boy Scout master, and Trinity Church leader who has made a positive impact on countless lives connected to our community of Pelican Rapids. Let us now reflect on his message as we listen to the song Requiem for a Soldier.